Hello, everyone. Today is another podcast of Beyond Binary, where we're exploring the human touch points of AI, data, and technology. Today, I couldn't be more proud to welcome Lisa Thee. Lisa and I are sisters from another mother, pals for a while now, and here to talk about a couple of different things today. I think we're going to spotlight a little bit about chronic illness, as well as how you can reboot your career with AI. So with that said, let's welcome Lisa.
Thank you so much, Bundy. I'm looking forward to catching up. It's been too long.
It has. On that front, what have you been up to? How are you feeling?
Well, I closed out December of 2023, wrapping up my work as the managing director of AI for Launch Consulting. And this year, I'm really focusing in on rebuilding my health. And the way I'm choosing to do that is to be able to feel part of the world in ways that are more intermittent and thought leadery than being an operator any longer, as I'm working towards getting my Social Security disability benefits in place. So it's actually been a really nice transition in that I found that a new hobby with hosting my own podcast. I did that professionally for 3 years for the company, interviewing AI leaders, including yourself, on navigating forward. And now I've launched my own podcast, Go Reboot Your Life. Excuse me. My voice came out there for a minute. The Reboot Your Life podcast, building on some of the lessons from my book that you mentioned, Go Reboot Your Career in 90 Days, and expanding it beyond the workplace. And so it's been a real pleasure interviewing interesting people to see how they have managed big transitions in their lives. And it has inspired me to focus in on a couple areas in 2024 and beyond. The first is in business about AI. Learned from some of the experiences I've had deploying solutions in the wild since 2015 on behalf of large multinational companies, as an entrepreneur myself, as the CEO of a software company, and then ultimately, being a guide as a managing director at a consulting firm. And the second area that I'm focusing in on is education. And so I've been partnering with my alma mater, the University of Michigan, the industrial engineering organization. They have offered me the opportunity to come in and teach some professional development classes on career agility for engineers, as well as on intro to responsible AI. So that's keeping me quite busy as I'm building those out. So between workshops, keynotes, and some retainer type work, that's how I'm filling my days, and I'm filling my fun and my playtime with podcasting. Besides keeping my 11 and 12-year-old alive, that's the other hobby.
That's an important thing, right?
We still got. So I'm a soccer mom on the weekends and a theater mom during the week, and all those things as well, and always a Yorkie mom. I'm passionate about my dog.
I've got, I'm an animal lover, so my house is an absolute zoo. I don't know what I would do if I had just one dog. We've got 5 at my house.
Wow, got a pack.
Yeah, it's always a little crazy, but let's double click a little bit on health, right? I know you and I, one of the ways that we really connected was on our struggles, with health and chronic illness. How are you feeling? I know you've been going through some new testing, etc. How are you feeling overall? What's the latest?
I feel like I'm finally getting to stability. So my chronic illness is something called Behçet's disease. It's a very rare illness. In fact, statistically, you're more likely to get struck by lightning twice in one lifetime than to get this illness. Unfortunately, there isn't any cure for it, but it is manageable with the right interventions. So after an 11-year magical mystery tour of rheumatologists, neurologists, and lots of other specialists in GI and other things, we were finally able to come to the conclusion that this was the root cause of what was going on. It is a vascular autoimmune disease. So when I have flares, it attacks my veins and arteries systemically throughout my body. So I had a lot of work to do in terms of learning how to pace myself, not necessarily an intrinsic skill set as a type A entrepreneur.
Right.
And also I had a lot of learning to do on how to make sure that I listen to my body and don't tune out those signals. I am not proud of this, but it is just a fact of my life that I tend to get very passionate about the work that I do. I focused in on AI for good professionally since 2015. And so sometimes my sense of responsibility gets overactivated, especially when I'm dealing with victims of crimes of human trafficking and child abuse.
Yeah.
So historically, I've done things like work from a morphine drip in the hospital when I had a ruptured disc in my back, and travel to Austin to present on stage at South by Southwest when I can't walk around my own block. Um, so I'm learning that just pushing through and using those skills that I had from a kid in athletics set me back quite a bit, and I can't keep making the same poor choices over and over again. So this is me eating my own dog food. I wrote this book starting in 2021 before my diagnosis came in, but um, post COVID, I had a lot of complications because my autoimmune disease wasn't treated properly. So I have mild cognitive impairment to manage around for the rest of my life. I have some aneurysms that are being watched, and I may lose some organs.
Mm,
So it's serious, but now stable. And frankly, I haven't really been able to say it was stable probably until the last few months. And so I'm grateful that at least I kind of know what I'm working with now.
yeah.
Um, Diagnosis came in 2022. I cycled through 2 or 3 different treatments before we found one that had the right balance of side effects and benefits.
Right.
And, in the midst of all of that, I also had to learn, how to rebalance my work life. And so that was the origin story for why I wrote this book. I had gone through a few reboots when I left corporate America as a director of a $6 billion P&L for a multinational tech firm, specializing in hybrid cloud for enterprise and government. When I left to do my own software company to help make children safer online and in real life, and then from there into management consulting after I exited my company into BART. So I've done quite a few reboots, and I've done some executive coaching for others that have wanted to go into more intra or entrepreneurial endeavors. And I've coached CEOs for multiple years now in this space. And it felt like the right time to get it down in a book so that when people were starting to feel that hopeless, like, oh my gosh, I feel like from the time I wake up to the time I go to bed, my time is not my own. And I'm sprinting constantly to try to just keep up with all the demands, that I can give people a recipe that they can internalize and use, to slow down enough so that they can get really clear on what they want, what they bring, and where they who's in their network that can help to make that happen. So
Yeah.
it's really a method of go slow to go fast.
Which you touched on so many things. First off, on the health front, I'm glad that it's stabilized. My own health journeys. I mean, I even had to recently do a GoFundMe to get help with my healthcare expenses, with the insurance changes, with tech layoffs, etc. So I've been battling the same struggles, sister. Which I know we've been talking about that for a long time when you and I meet. I think as type A people, especially, I'm the same way. I still have not found the right balance. And what I do is I tend to be go, 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 go. I'm on until I'm just
Yes.
not. Yeah, until I'm just not. And my body is like, you can't move, even get out of bed, right? Like getting out of bed sometimes is just so hard when you burn all of the energy that you have. Even if you're not
Yeah.
physically moving, like even your mental energy, your emotional energy, it's all sapped out.
It's
So
cumulative, right? So I think, full disclosure, you called me 10 minutes before we went live and said, "Hey, you joining this thing?" And what did I say to you?
you're like, I'm in bed. I was gonna get on closer, and I'm like, okay.
Yeah, and the reason why is right now it's hard for me to hold my neck up. So we're at, the second half of the day. I
Yeah,
can usually sit up for about 4 hours. I have recorded a few. I've been a guest on a couple shows today,
Yep.
and had to run my kid to school and back, and those kinds of things. And so cumulatively, I kind of hit my limit where my body's saying, tap out now.
Yeah.
But frankly, I know your schedule and I know my schedule. And if we try to do this again, we'll get it done in June, July, August sometime.
Exactly.
Um,
Something. Right.
some things are worth pushing through for, and this is one of them. The
Thank you.
second thing I
Thank
just
you.
want to comment on is just I want to extend my compassion to you that we happen to unfortunately live in the one country that's a developed country that tethers healthcare to employment. And it's been the reason that I've been trying to hold on, like with the tippy tips of my
Lost.
fingers, since 2021 when I became physically and hearing disabled, because
Yeah.
the cost of healthcare for me, without insurance is about 200K a year, to keep
Oh,
me
yeah.
stable. And so it didn't feel like the right time to be like, I'm going to retire now at 45. I kind of thought I'd work till I was like 95. I like working.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's just setting back my recovery. And so
Yeah.
my empathy goes out to you that you have to put so much personal information out there just to survive. It feels like an indignity we put on people exclusively in America, and it's just gross.
It's definitely something that it is not right, right? I mean, I think we definitely have a medical system that's very broken, and I don't. There's many systems broken, right? The insurance processes, the pharmaceuticals for profit, process. For me in particular, I'm a pretty transparent person, and you know that I don't mind saying things that a lot of people are having conversations that a lot of people would find hard or challenging or putting out there. This one though was a little different. It's embarrassing to ask for money, right? Especially if you've been in some of these high end roles like you and I have, and you're like, I can't afford my own
Yes,
medical treatment.
C-suite to GoFundMe is not the path most people expect to go through in midlife.
Exactly, but when you're thinking about something like for my medications in particular, my immunoglobulin therapy, it's just one of my medications, right? But it's the main thing that keeps my immune system up and going. And if you think about what my particular disease is, my immune system does not make antibodies the way most people does, even if it's been exposed to something through physically coming in contact with it, or even with vaccines, etc. I don't have B cell memory, and so I literally have to do a immune system transplant every week, which means I get live antibodies that come through plasma donations by plasma donors to go into my body because I don't make them. So it's not something like you take a pill every day. No, it's literally live antibodies, and they only last in your body for so long. And so every week I have to redo it. And so back to just the cost, plasma technologies are very expensive. And anyone who's donated plasma before knows you often get paid to donate plasma as well.
Yep.
Each vial of my medication has thousands of donors antibodies. Okay. So my medication is literally like almost $7,500 a week that I have to do for life because my immune system, there's no immune system transplant, right? You can't.
Yeah. I'm in the same boat. So my infusions are every 8 weeks, and they're about $20,000 because they have to grow the tumor blocking factor in mice and transplant it intravenously in the
Review.
oncology ward.
Yeah.
Because there's such a risk of anaphylactic shock from it coming from a non-human host. And that's the only thing that stops my disease from progressing. So my empathy chip for you. I wish I didn't know this much about the medical system and the government disability systems that I do now. I
Yeah.
was a perfectly able-bodied person until 44. So it's been a humbling journey, but I think that's why we're here, is to talk about how do we use adaptability to
Yeah.
drive change and thrive. And I actually think it's a really interesting time that AI is coming into the much more of the public awareness, because
Yeah.
some of the things that I thought were deal breakers for me to stay employed and be able to be a business owner like I've been for 14 years are actually enabled because of AI.
Yeah.
And they weren't available when I started this journey of writing this book back in 2021. So kind of cool to see it coming full circle.
Well, on that topic, 2 points, and then 2 things. There's so much potential for AI to help people like you and I. Like number one, I'm like, both of us have very, very rare diseases that were not diagnosed until later in life. At least we know, right? A lot of people don't know when they have these diseases, and I know my dad in particular, that cost him his life. Eventually, he had the same
My
disease.
grandmother as well. There's a genetic component to my disease. Yeah.
Mine as well. So, at least we know, right? Knowing is
Yep.
half the battle.
Yep.
Back to the medical system, my doctors literally, I can see a look of worry from my doctors when I walk in the room, not because of what I'm going to come in with as far as new sickness, but usually because I'm going to run them through the ringer in regards to questions and what can I do, whatever. You have to be your own advocate when it comes to healthcare, and not just healthcare, career as well, right? I tell people all the time, you have
Some
to
of
be
those skills from work are definitely applicable in the medical system, but I also find that you have to find the right medical team that's open to
totally,
collaborate with you as a patient,
totally, totally,
and that
totally.
took me many years to get in place.
Yes, it does. And don't be afraid to make changes, right? Be your own advocate. If you're not finding the type of care that you need or the relationship that you need, then make switch to someone else until you get it, right?
Yeah,
But
it was kind of cognitive dissonance for me because from a day job perspective as a management consultant, I was working with the head of cardiology at one of the world's leading research hospitals to help. He happened to also be the chief digital transformation officer for UCSF Hospital at the time. And so I'm partnering with him because they have IP that they want to take out of the hospital system and spin up into a standalone startup. So he wants my skills from an entrepreneur standpoint to help him
yep,
guide on that journey. And at the
yep,
same time, after I get done with my conversations with him, I'm going right into meetings with my rheumatologist myself,
right.
who is um, at the time, unfortunately, wasn't very open to my input. He didn't believe that I had such a serious disease.
Mm,
He told me that it was an ethical violation for him to write down that I had such a serious disease because he hadn't seen all 4 sets of clinical symptoms himself, even though they were all well documented in my chart. And that if I
interesting.
and that, and I said, "Well, I'm a little bit more concerned about being undertreated than overtreated because I keep
Right,
getting sent home with life-threatening challenges. So I'd
right,
rather them be a little overcautious," because he was concerned they would give me the example he used was a spinal tap if I came in with a headache.
right.
Once this was on um, my list, but what was happening today without it being on there is I'm being treated like a middle-aged anxious woman
I was gonna say,
who
was there
needs
bias
attention.
there related? I find there's a lot of bias for females in the medical system.
Yeah, so, he didn't know me long term like my primary care doctor because now I'm in the
Yeah,
specialist world, and, you know, I mean, like, I think I remember a 30-minute lecture I got about how I have herpes and I need to reduce and that it's just stress from him, and, I was like, I I understand your perspective. We swab my sores, they're not herpes, so now what?"
right,
Um, and he was getting very flustered with me. I actually thought that perhaps it was because he couldn't hear it from a woman, so I brought in my dad, both of us
yeah,
engineers by background. I'm like, "My dad
yeah,
can, be a good advocate for me." He was just as big of a jerk to my dad, so the good news is it wasn't bias, he just had that personality. But I will tell you that, him not believing me after seeing me for a year and a half and, um, really set me back. I almost gave up. I was this close because I had manually done what AI does in order to get an answer on personalized medicine for myself, which was
right,
I went through my entire genetic profile and looked at all possible diseases that had the symptoms that were the primary root cause. And when I
right.
went through that manually over the course of a year and a half, which is what we were training our models to do for things at UCSF Hospital, I found one answer and I knew what it was. But it took a year and a half to get doctors to believe me. When I
Yeah.
went to a specialist that understood this disease, he looked at my medical chart and diagnosed me in 4 minutes. He knew right away. But because it's rare, not every doctor I saw in California just didn't have enough experience with it to understand what it could really look like.
I actually I had a similar story for me. So for me, I my diseases, we've got different types of diseases, but I think that they come out the same way in that there's a lot of like chronic fatigue. There's a lot of infection, recurrence type of infection. There's a lot of just kind of odd illnesses, right? Like the
Yep.
super rare things that no one gets. All you've got it, and then you've got the next one next year and everything else. But for me, I had a similar journey. I think that between 2000, I think it was like 15 to 2020 is when I really, really started to notice something majorly wrong. Like I'm like, something's really wrong. Um, and I went to about 30 different specialists during that period of time. And it was very similar to you. People would, well, you just work a lot, you're tired. Or here's my favorite, it's probably hormones. It must be something with your hormones and this. And I'm just like, that's bullshit. Not to, but I'm like, no, I'm literally keeping calendars. Like these things are cyclical, like things are happening. Can you look at the big picture? And what I found was that, especially in the US, a lot of Western medicine tends to look at a symptom versus looking at the full picture. And so, like you, I finally got into a rheumatologist because I was like, it's got to be something. I thought I had something autoimmune, not immune
Yep.
deficient, but autoimmune.
Right.
And I finally got into a rheumatologist who literally, like, my first appointment with him was just day and night different than other appointments because he spent like an hour and a half going end to end through my history, all of my doctor's files, like all like surgeries I've had, illnesses I've had, etc. And I remember he was like, Wendy, I think that you have a problem with infections. And I
Mhm.
was just, I remember going, what are you talking about? I don't get like pussy infectious. He's like, no, like colds, flus, bronchitis, pneumonia. He goes, it's not normal to be on antibiotics from like October to June every year. And I'm like, what do you mean? I always am. He's like, that's not normal, you know?
Yes, you're
And so,
normal, but not
yeah,
normal.
it's not
Yeah.
normal, but he was like, that's not normal. And so he was who initially said, we need to do a primary immune deficiency workup. And I remember I was so aggravated once I found out kind of what it was. And we went down that path because it was simple blood work. It's
Yeah.
just blood.
The
It's
second
not
they
even,
finally when they finally wrote this disease in my chart, um, and I started medication for it, my doctor, who I switched rheumatologist by then, said, I just had one patient that had this disease in New York, and one time, I just did a CT scan because that's what I do for my sister. She was dealing with
yeah.
something, and it shocked me that even though she looked fine on the outside, the quote was, "She was littered with aneurysms."
Oh,
And I
wow.
remember he said, "Just do me a favor and, just get this done. I'm not concerned it's gonna show anything, but just go ahead and do it." And that was within, weeks of getting my diagnosis. And lo and behold, he found some things, and
Right.
I was in emergency PET scans and angiograms and CT scans and, vascular surgery consults all within 72 hours. And that's all in the book, Go Reboot Your Career. And the reason I decided to keep that in there was, a lot of what I was doing was trying to keep up with people that didn't have the same limitations that I did and not asking for accommodations in the workplace because I was in a competitive environment that I didn't want to single myself out as kind of being the weaker one of the herd. I feel like
Yeah.
since about turning 40, I kind of felt like the gazelle that like was a little bit behind the pack, but trying to keep up so you don't get picked off by the lion. But
Right.
when I was affected directly by COVID early in the pandemic, in June of 2020. That's when it got like, oh, I can't even like there's no obscuring the level of illness that I have at this point. It kind of
Right.
10x'd all my symptoms. And that's when I got real serious about finding out what this was. Um, so bravo to us, we got there.
We
And
know,
for
we
those of
know
you
again.
that are
No,
not in the rare disease community, you can support people that are in, situations with chronic illness by, believing people when they tell you their experience in their own body. And you can also help, if you're in the data world, by helping to build models and to build data bias diversity into your solutions so that things aren't missed as commonly as they are today. So I'm really proud of the work that we did with UCSF and the work that they've done with Beekeeper AI, which is now hosted in Microsoft Azure, for helping people that are building models for medical OEM applications or pharmaceutical companies or startups to have access to enough personally identifiable information and data to train and validate their models so that we can get more FDA approval to get those for clinical settings.
we
Because if I
should.
waited for one
Yeah,
doctor to figure it out, I wouldn't be here anymore. And
yeah.
I think we need to be able to partner with AI to help these doctors who honestly are overscheduled, overworked, and need a little co-pilot to say, "Hey, did you ever think about this?" Um, in order to give them the data to justify investing in the testing that's required.
But back to you. I think there's so much opportunity for AI in particular to do good in the medical field, right?
Yep.
Like you said, that doctors are overwhelmed. A lot of times they're spending more time on the bureaucracy of the paperwork than they do in actually treating or listening to the patients, right? And then when it comes to people like you and I who have really rare diseases, that they're not going to see it, right? Like in fact, on my disease, we're called zebras for a reason, because in medical school they teach doctors, like, if you see XYZ symptoms, think it's like a horse. Like, if you hear hooves, it's a horse, it's a horse. But we're zebras. Our symptoms are not going to be the same as others, or the results are not going to be the same as others, and you can't treat us the same. So you can't, like the more we're discovering about the body and genes, and even like with COVID and other things, like the more personalized medicine needs to become, and the smarter we need to be with the technology to enable that, right? So it's truly a tool. But on
Well,
this
that's where
front,
our data expertise comes in, right, Wendy? Because
yep,
the data doesn't lie. So when we can bring in broader data sets from medical institutions, across the world that maybe will help us to reduce the gaps and bias for making sure that if you're a Indian woman in Bangalore, that you get the same level of care and treatment and your diagnosis journey is as quick as a man in Boston.
yep,
Um, and that's going to come from AI innovation, that's going to come from data, and that's going to come from making sure that we don't make the same mistakes with bias as
yep.
we build these models that we do as humans naturally, because to be human is to be biased. It's not on purpose,
Right.
and it is what it is. And
And
I
you can
also
use
have my
data to
zebra ring.
offset that bias, right? I mean, data can be used once you know there's bias. You can use data to offset bias in the models to kind of correct everything else. But for me, there's so much opportunity for good in the medical space, but there's also so much opportunity for bad, right? In regards to, AI is a tool, but it's just like a hammer. Are you going to use a hammer to build, or are you going to use a hammer to destroy, right?
Yep.
So not only is the data come in, but that's where the trust factor comes in regards to treating that information appropriately, or with the right compliance or the right security protocols. But overall, I think, AI is. I'm waiting for the day where it's going to be like Star Trek, because my stuff is genetic, and so I'm like, when can I get Dr. Bose, who's just like, great Scott, are you a, what did you always say? Are you like a Viking? Are you a whatever? Like, no cutting, just reprogram the genes, because it's like,
I'm
we just
looking forward to the days of Baymax. I want my personal Stay Puft Marshmallow nursing assistant, please.
all right. So to your book. Now, I am one of the people who I got an early read into your book, because that was right when I was transitioning out of Tableau, and I was trying to decide what I wanted to do with my career, my future. And I started the nonprofit association in Costrada. And
Mhm.
your book was one of those kind of guiding factors that really enabled me to kind of focus on what drives me, what makes me happy, what am I good at, where can I make a what was important to me about my career going forward. And for me, it was about making a difference, right? Like I want to share knowledge, I want to make a difference, I want to have an impact, and I want to have it like at a large community enablement scale. So why don't you share some of the tips in the book that you have in regards to people who are thinking about transitioning?
Sure. So, one of the things that we talked about was, as people are exploring their journey, like what are some of these new trends with AI and how do they start to enable new possibilities for people? For people like us that maybe went to college 20 years plus ago, that are looking to reinvent themselves, what are those opportunities? And so I think one of the places that I highlight in the book is really around innovation and the impact that it can have in the new normals that we have in the workplace. And one of those things that's enabling that is that, business leaders are really becoming indispensable. And the reason why is about 90% of all data that exists today was created in the last 2 years
Yep.
and propelling, the internet forward into that zettabyte era. So by 2025, it's estimated that we'll have about 463 terabytes of information created every day. So that is creating an emerging skill set that's required to be able to make sense of all of that information at scale. And it's going to be coming mostly in unstructured data in various different types between video and audio and text and image and all the things. And so I think the tools are going to become democratized enough that people that maybe were an expert in a particular business industry, for example, I grew up in Detroit, so there was a lot of people that were familiar with the automotive industry and manufacturing in that space. They can start to pivot into being in roles where they can let the AI assistant do some of that manual, tedious, repetitive
Yeah.
work that they
Yeah.
needed to do to be able to make strategic decisions as a subject matter expert. Maybe that's in finance, or maybe they're in supply chain, or whatever area that they apply it to, maybe HR. Engineering. But by bringing those tools to bear, an example, one of the companies that I advise for today is called Humaxa. They've built an AI assistant that allows car manufacturers to provide a tool bespoke to their design engineers to be able to ingest and talk back and forth like a chat GPT type of interface, but it's
Like
a
an advisor.
private,
Yeah.
yeah, as an advisor on making sure when they're designing cars, they're taking into factors all of the environmental regulations and the evolving landscape there. And what they've been able to do is demonstrate that they can literally cut 3 months of time out of the design cycle for automotive
Mhm.
by giving people real-time assistance that's been trained on the latest and greatest. So as they're making designs, they can be checking that it meets all the criteria that sometimes is competing criteria, because maybe the state has a different regulation than the federal does, and maybe an international has something like that. So it can tell them where to be focusing on as they need to adjust and bringing them real-time information instead of having to go out and research everything. So going from a 9-month cycle to a 6-month cycle is a no-brainer
Right.
for those kinds of use cases. But what I noticed there is the person that had to be such an expert in every little detail of all the regulations to be able to design a vehicle in the world before AI in the workplace is
Yeah.
going to now be opening up to somebody that doesn't have to have all of that lived experience and tribal knowledge and can just be a great innovator, designer, creative, and the AI can help them to get awesome results that can be that product that, relaunches the American auto industry into like the
Right.
next stratosphere. But those things, we don't know what we don't know yet. But what I hope is that we recognize that there's an awareness that there is going to be a lot of high paying roles available to people that embrace AI as a great assistant in whatever field they're currently working in or whatever field they want to pursue. And so upskilling in this area is going to require things like learning pathways and
Right.
residency programs and mentorship. But with the bringing the community together to help to do that, it's really going to be a really exciting time for people that maybe aren't highly represented in different fields, to have the opportunity to break in and also to have their voices heard and their innovation seen. And I'm really excited to see what the power of will happen when people are not just invited to the table, but are allowed to change the conversation,
No,
and what innovation will come out from those diverse perspectives.
yeah, no, I think it's going to be a whole new world when that starts to happen, right? I mean, you think about today, like there's so much control that happens in innovation based on who's been able to get into those fields coming out of the education systems or coming out
Yep.
of the hiring. And you think about some of those controls kind of laxing and bringing in new thoughts. For me, I'm like, back to AI is a tool, right? It's a tool, and it's a tool that allows you to scale in new ways,
Mhm.
and explore new opportunities, right? So if you were that SME in one particular area, maybe you're spending time making sure the model outputs are correct for a point in time, but you're tying that process to the next step in a chain of process, etc., and you're able to amplify that knowledge that you have, and as far as impact, right,
Right.
down into new areas and new capabilities. Like, I just think there's so much opportunity for positive, and truly impactful change around the globe because of that limitation and control that exists today in the hiring and the DEI and who goes into these fields. Once that's loosened, it's going to be very, very different. How do
Well, I
you
think
think?
it's we're
But
kind of like at the same place we were when personal computers came into the workplace. It's
yeah,
like it's a seismic shift, and I don't think a lot of people realize that's the level of magnitude that it's going to have quite yet.
yeah,
Um, but with that in mind, if you can start to see just a few clicks ahead, what I think will happen is all those research arms and innovation arms of these big companies that are centralized groups of the privileged few that get to be able to innovate is going to be
yeah,
democratized
yeah,
across sectors and across industries. And there's so much available in terms of free and low cost education online to get yourself
yeah.
lined up for those kinds of opportunities, that I think it's really going to be one of those things where if you're adaptive and open to change, you can start to leverage these tools to accelerate your output and accelerate the outcomes.
Yeah.
But if you're phobic of it and you stay away from it completely, you might get left behind, because the best subject matter expert without an AI assistant is probably not going to be as good as a mediocre one with it.
Right, right, right. I mean, it's definitely something where we need to embrace the reality of what's happening with technology today. You need to understand how to use these tools and how to leverage them for your own benefit, right? To scale, because again, there's a scalability factor that happens with this period.
But I,
If,
I want to say, for the people that are not like you, that actually understood how to
yeah,
build these things, don't ask me to get in Python
yeah,
or Ruby on
yeah,
Rails or whatever is the latest and greatest
right,
right now. I've been leading teams of developers to build these tools for my
yeah,
company and for others, but I can't do it myself. I think
right.
there's going to be a lot more people like me, where in 2015, if you asked me to tell you what AI stood for, I probably might not get it right,
No,
even
no,
though I
I
was
actually
working in
think
a
you're
tech
right.
company.
I think you're right. In fact, if you haven't seen, who was it that made the news just the other day? I think it wasn't it the OpenAI gentleman, but someone was saying like, oh, I think it was NVIDIA, where they were saying, don't go into engineering. And I'm like, I actually somewhat agree with that, because here's what's happened, right? Engineers built AI to try to get to some baseline of human intelligence with their mindset that human intelligence is based on their ability to code. So they explicitly built AI based on coding capabilities as a tool, and it will get to a point where it is better than most developers, right, or more scalable. So to me, I think the skill sets are, how do you leverage the tool itself, not building it, but how do you leverage the tool to actually guide the experiences or the impacts, or again, the volume of work, right, and the innovation. Those are totally different than building the tool itself, right? Which we had a question that came in that's related to this about what's the best pathway to get into the AI field. Like, how do you recommend people go now if engineering isn't the right path?
Sure, fair enough. And I don't want to give the impression that I know all the pathways, but I can tell you some things that I've used to upskill because, frankly, I was completely unqualified to be the thought leader in AI that I currently am just less than 10 years ago. And so,
We all
um,
learn. We make our own qualifications through learning. So
over time, yeah.
that's right.
Um, and mine was a non-traditional journey. I just decided that the problem of human trafficking made me sick to my stomach, and I had a not on my watch kind of response to it. And I was selling AI tools and solutions in healthcare. And I said, what happens if we apply this same tool to a different problem set? Can we maybe recover missing children that are being trafficked? And spoiler alert, when we did that partnership with Amazon and Microsoft and Thorn in 2017 to explore bringing more image matching capabilities to bear, we were able to recover 130 children a month that were falling through the cracks. So to me, the power of the tool is what excites me, not the tool itself.
Right, right,
Um,
right, right.
so how I learned is a few different ways. Self-education. I'm a big podcast listener. I'm a big reader. So I learned a lot about these tools from experts in the field that are putting out their perspective broadly, like Wendy is, and the association is
Thank
supporting.
you.
Secondarily, I took an AI ethics course through the University of Michigan through professional development, so I could get some credentials to put up that I've been through a formal program for a month. I really enjoy collaborating with Women in Data, which is a global nonprofit. They have I interviewed their CEO for my book, and they have over 30,000 women that are in somewhere in data science, somewhere along the journey, and they've created a lot of programs and pathways to create not only the opportunity for the education, but the community to make it stick. And I love what their CEO says is that, 50% of the population will need this upskilling just to deal with the rapid change in technology. It's a common language between countries, which I think is really exciting to see more people have more opportunity. And, it really is about awareness. So they really focus in on making sure that people are aware of the opportunities in tech and data science, and they will take people from where they are starting. So
Yeah,
you can come in and say, my experience with data is maybe being a data analyst at a company, or my experience is potentially, I have a little bit of engineering background, but not in these languages. They can start to build cohorts and communities to give you safe places to experiment and be able to fail and fail forward.
yeah,
You're never going to learn anything new if you don't try some things. I love DataKind for being able to participate in hackathons on topics that may call to you and you may be passionate about, so that you can start to surround yourself with communities of people that have those skills, but bring your own special talent to bear. Um, and then last but not least, obviously going to a data science boot camp as an option. I know that when I was hiring my primary data scientist, I hired out of a boot camp. And I was really delighted with that versus maybe some of the more traditional pathways with collegiate, because frankly, data science skills get real rusty real fast because this field moves so quickly. So
yeah. It's changing so fast, and I think that's one of the biggest things to think about when you think about pathways, right? There's not just one. Like, figure out the nugget that interests you the most. Like you said, are you an analyst? Are you interested in marketing, or are you coming out of finance? Are you interested in medicine? Find a blogger, a TikTok person, find an association within that particular kind of business function that's working on AI and analytics, and network, get to know each other.
yep,
That's really, for me, that's why I built the association.ai, was to create like a bridge for people who work in data, AI, ethics, privacy, security, robotics, because our disciplines like have touch points, and there's not ethical
absolutely.
AI without us working together. So one of the things that we're trying to work on now is actually creating a education portal for people to find, like,
Yep.
what did Lisa recommend? What did Jeff recommend? What does Wendy recommend taking? Maybe some of it's free, maybe some of it's paid. That's up to you to take it, but let's crowdsource the knowledge, right, in one location so people are armed.
Last but not least, I really like some of the classes from Google, and you can earn badges, and they're usually pretty bite size. And even as someone who's worked in the industry and knows all the jargon, for a
Mhm.
long, I've worked in it for quite a while now. I learn something every day. I think that's half the battle, is willing to be vulnerable and be like, I don't understand all of this. Like the first time I spent a significant amount of time with data scientists, I felt like they were speaking a completely different language beyond English. I'm like, what the heck is a contextual inquiry? And
Yeah.
why do I need an R value? And like,
Right.
what are you talking about? But like just like entrepreneurship coming out of a corporate environment, it's just a lingo and a
Yeah.
language. And once you
Yeah.
get used to it, you get more comfortable. And I think also, if anybody tells you that they fully understand this field, they are incompetent.
Yeah.
The
It's changing.
best minds in the world don't fully understand how
Yeah.
this works. The people that invented it don't.
Yeah.
And I feel really qualified to tell you that because I host the main stage of the World AI Festival in Cannes every year. And I'm literally interviewing the people that invent this stuff. And they
Yeah.
can tell you we don't exactly know how it all works. So
Yeah.
you don't have to be a genius to be able to use a new tool. You don't need to know how to design a computer to use one.
Yeah.
And it's just about getting yourself in environments where you can start to be exposed and get more
Yeah.
comfortable.
I'll give you guys an example, by the way, my own personal example. I have been, again, I'm not working right now, which meaning for a corporation, which means I'm not being funneled into certain tools, right, for AI. So I've been trying to figure out what I can use to make myself more scalable and effective. So like last night, I was literally doing research on GPT scripts and how to actually use tools like either Otter AI or Fireflies, which can do meeting notes and other things. And with like Notion, and how can I automate things like newsletters or email prompts, etc. So I literally am trying to piece together components to perform a job function at a higher pace and higher scale, right? So I'm literally looking at YouTube. I'm reading blogs. I went to Claude and Chat GPT, and I was looking at code bits out of each one of them and comparing other things. So I'm just playing around, right? I mean, paths don't have to be a formal path, right? Paths can be
Absolutely.
what you
And there's
make
some
of
great
it.
ideas in the comments as well. Not one size fits all. People like to learn in different ways. I can honestly tell you though, if you want to learn, there is more information out there today than any other
Too much.
time in history. It's really about just getting started somewhere.
Yeah. So pick something. Again, I want to automate meeting notes in newsletters. Go out there and do some research with some of the latest tools. I was amazed at just the amount of like voice AI note plugins, etc. And so even I was like, how do I plug these into if I'm using Google or if I'm using Microsoft, or even they have their own co-pilots now, right? So it's like,
Yep.
which one's the best to get the breed? But you pick a problem that you personally have and just go start learning.
So for me, my biggest problem is I have short-term memory issues. And so just turning the AI feature on for my Zoom calls so that I get summarized notes that clearly have everyone's name spelled out and what we agreed to and what next steps are, that I can just quickly send to my clients that are hiring me for keynotes or for workshops or, ethical AI strategy, has been a huge game changer for me, because I used to take those notes when I was talking to them, and now I can just make eye contact with them and really trust that the automation is going to do its job after seeing that it's a pretty good, like, it's not the best notes I've ever seen in my entire life. That's not what I need.
Right,
It's high average, totally reliable. If I
right.
read them once, I might delete a line here or there, but there's something I can share with the other people, and we can all remember what we agreed to, and we all
Yeah.
have it documented so we can hold people accountable to what they said they're gonna do.
Right. No, it's a time saver, right? It's a tool. It's the way
Totally.
to boost you to do something else. You don't have to recap that meeting. You don't have to send the email. I even, like, yesterday I integrated one of these in with Slack and into some of the Slack channels. So I'm like, okay, now it's pulling and it's going to record the meetings. It's going to summarize the meeting notes. It's going to spit it out in Slack. That saves me time, and we won't lose, we won't lose traction in regards to tracking who's doing what, when, where, or why.
The other tool I love is lately AI to handle and automate all of my social media posting. So
Oh, I need to
I
check
have
it out.
I have been a huge fan of Kate Brandley-Chernus, who's the CEO of this company. She is a marketing guru, and she has been really early in bespoke LLMs to take all of your long form content and turn it into short, engaging social media posts for your audience. And it is a huge time saver for me. And I can tell you that the before and after of doing everything manually on my LinkedIn profile versus using the automation to make sure that my content gets all the mileage that it can
Yep.
is night and day. I get people like checking in with me like, gosh, you look like you're killing it. Like, it's so amazing what you're up to. I'm like, I'm in Cabo. I've had like a lot of tequila. You don't want to hear what's going to come out of my mouth right now. I'm not working, but it's it's scaling me, right? So I think there's some really great places to look at how to use it to your advantage, especially for business leaders and
Yeah.
technical folks. If it's coding problems, like there is no glory in doing it the hard way when you can use the time savings to be more creative and innovative as a product manager, to be thinking like a business owner, to be making
Yeah.
sure that you're not just doing something, you're doing the right stuff.
Right. No, I love, send me the link because I need to check that out for myself. I've been trying to
I will
get,
put it in the chat.
yeah, please do. I think you got to get a LinkedIn to do that. But yeah, please do. So one more question, and then let's open it up. I think we covered most of the topics we wanted to talk about in conversation form. But one important area is about the role of nonprofits, right? What do you think the role of nonprofits or even just civic organizations are in this AI world, right? So I'm thinking more on the trust and the quality and the bias perspective. What are your thoughts on that space?
Oh, so many thoughts, so little time. Yeah, my area of expertise is really around trust and safety. I've been working early in those days because my focus was on protecting children. That tended to be where those teams in big tech were focused because it was some of the content that was clearly felonious, and so they had to invest in getting it removed. My thought is there is a huge role to play in nonprofits or industry associations that function with technical experts with a non-for-profit expertise. I've seen different approaches to it. I think it's going to be a shared value model where the public sector and the private sector have to come together to create the right balance of optimizing revenue and the managing the downsides and risks to society. I think that with some of the innovations we've had in regulation with things like the AI Act coming out of Europe and some of the mandates coming out of the US, it will at least give us a framework for companies to start investing more in this, because there
Yeah.
will be a financial penalty if they don't. It's really hard as fiduciary responsible C-suites and boards to be investing and doing the right thing when your competitors aren't. And
Right.
so by having a more clean baseline for justifying the return on investment of doing the right thing, I think will help to up-level everyone. I think
Yeah.
we saw that a lot with GDPR in the
Right.
privacy space, and I think this is an extension of some of those kinds of
Concepts. Yeah.
Yep. So I'm hopeful that this space gets filled in with talented people that can help to move the needle. I'm also realistic that this is a global world and we're open sourcing a lot of really powerful tools that unfortunately sometimes people will misapply. And I think
Yeah.
it's really naive from my work in child safety to assume that people can self regulate.
Yeah.
Uh, you know, I can tell you that if I wanted to build a tool to help pedophiles find child sexual abuse material content faster, I would have been a billionaire overnight. But selling a product to
Yeah.
help parents make sure that their kids aren't victims of these people, it is painfully difficult to get people to adopt.
Right, right.
And so, unfortunately, sometimes the bad actors adopt technology faster than the people that are accountable to help protect us, like law enforcement, because they have very different regulatory frameworks they have to operate in. So I'm hopeful that nonprofits like yours can help to fill some of those gaps to make sure that the people that are making these laws are educated about the right ways to go about it. We don't want to stifle innovation. It's always going to be a balancing act between innovation and risk. And
Yeah.
as the threat landscapes will continue to evolve, we'll always have to be looking at that. And I think there's always going to be a need for that NGO sector to fill some of those gaps between governance and
Yeah.
practical applications.
Yeah, and that's to me that's I spent a lot of time on GDPR and CCPA and really kind of at the crux between software, data, and clouds, right? And how those things kind of work together and play together. And I think regulations are of course needed, but the regulations are not implementation guidelines, right? They're high level concepts that then if companies have to go and like you said, kind of self regulate their implementations of those regulations, then it almost makes the regulations moot if every company is doing it in a different way. I need to read the EU releases yesterday in more detail, but I mean, I think the EU is definitely kind of leading in this space. But until we get to like use case specific guidelines about what to collect or how to store, who owns what in regards to the data, or how do you take a bias concept and how do you offset it, right? Like I'll give you an example, Lisa. Why isn't there a clearinghouse of synthetic data that people can tap into around the globe that can be used to offset bias in a standardized way?
I actually advise for a company that's building and selling that data today. It's called Nerdle. I'm sorry. They exited one business and focused in on this. So if people are looking for that kind of access, check
Yeah.
out Nerdle. It's some of the best data science minds I saw that came out of Salesforce, and it's killer product.
Send me the link because that should be something that is available to everyone. Like in my opinion, that shouldn't be a business per se. Like it should be like a public clearinghouse, like for good, right? To offset.
Yeah,
But back
well, the
to
founders learned that it took about an $8 million spend a year to be able to collect enough data to be able to detect those things. So until
yeah,
the unfortunately, until the financials to give it away for free is there, it will probably have to be in the for-profit sector. The thing that's driving me nuts right now is since we're the streamers, I can't put in the links that we were telling you about. So thank you so much to the
you
user
have to
that
put
just
it
put in
on
Nerdle.
LinkedIn. So
And lately,
yeah,
AI is the other one that I wanted to share with people.
I'll put
Um,
them on the YouTube post. Do we
okay,
have
cool.
any questions from the audience? We've got about 2 minutes left. Anything, Lisa, you would like to spotlight on your book? I'm sure you got a copy.
Sure.
I tried to find mine. I've got a copy and I cannot find it.
Here it is. This is what it looks like. You can find it on Barnes and Noble and Amazon and all the places. I really think it's kind of a third, a third, a third. It's a third memoir of being a woman coming up in tech over the last 30 years and what I learned along the way. It's a third around the 90-day reboot process and how to get clear on where you are today and where you want to be, and how do you start to leverage your network and self-education to get you there. And then it's a third on all the things I learned as a startup founder myself, as being a successful entrepreneur, as well as an entrepreneur, because I worked in corporate America for 20 years and brought a lot of innovation to bear there. So my goal in writing this book was to make sure that when people are at that moment where they're like, what I was doing is not working for me anymore, and I'm burned out and I'm exhausted and I don't know where I want to go next, that they have, something they can pick up and really use like a recipe. So it's a reader note in this book that feel free to jump right to chapter 11 if you just want to know how to reboot your career. If you want to have, all the background of why I'm qualified and what I learned along the way to give this advice, feel free to read the first 10 chapters, but it's really up to you. I included them in there for a very strategic reason, though, which is if you go to my LinkedIn and you look me up, I'm going to look very polished and like it was very well planned and that there was no adversity in the way to get there. And at the end of the day, that is not true. Everything I put out there is absolutely honest and true, but it's not the whole story. And I wanted to give people a view into what were some of the challenges to get through to get to where I am today. And so feel free for people to follow my podcast, Go Reboot Your Life on all the platforms. And you can follow up with me on lisathie.com if you want to watch any content around interviewing AI leaders from across the globe. I host Navigating Abroad and can bring you people like the head of AI for Good from the UN. Fred is the interview that I showed there. But I just hope that everybody feels inspired to leave their mark on the world, the thing they're going to be proud of if they get diagnosed with something next year and can't keep doing what they're doing.
I personally, again, I really recommend this book. This was the only book. I'm not a career book reader. Like I like to read fiction or non-fiction, like historical or not. I'm
a murder mystery girl myself.
But I read Lisa's book, okay, and it was Lisa's book was literally what one of the things that helped me to decide to launch my own efforts and kind of really focus on what motivated me and drove me. So highly recommend it. It launched 2 companies out of that, Lisa. So
Wendy, it makes me feel so good to know that the year and a half I spent writing this darn thing has benefited someone. Thank you so much.
It has, especially the decision trees about, like what drives you and value systems and things like that in particular, I thought were very helpful for me. But otherwise, Lisa is definitely someone you want to follow. Be sure to follow her website, order the book. And otherwise, thank you so much for joining me and sharing your story.
Connect with me on LinkedIn. I love to put out content that I hope benefits everyone, and I would love to bring you in to the closer circle of how to have an impactful and responsible AI journey.
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Lisa. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.